Hey everybody, my name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and I'm making this video for bootcamp graduates in general. Okay, so if you're unaware, I do teach software engineering courses for General Assembly. So if you're in the market for a bootcamp, I recommend to come, join me and the other instructors at General Assembly and learn some cool stuff. Okay, I was a student once upon a time. Uh, Now a successful developer the last several years, and also have instructed many courses. So I can tell you firsthand that it's a worthwhile experience. Okay, but regardless of what approach you take to learn the skill of web development or development in general, you get to a point where it's time to go look for work. So what I want to do in this video is kind of give you tips to sort of like the secret sauce to really stand out, continue sharpening your skills and whatnot. So this is going to be there's going to be a lot of advice. You may want to watch this video a few times, but also I want to give you some other advice as far as ways you can always reach out to me for advice. Just head over to devnursery.com. Okay, that's one of my other websites. And there's a Slack community and a Discord community. And generally you can probably more easily reach me in the Slack community, but generally I'll respond on Discord as well. So you can join either and message me and communicate with other people who are aspiring developers looking to network and commune and all that. So generally, first step, go join those two. That way you kind of have that connection. But bottom line is this. Okay, actually let me set up like a Google Draw. Okay, so let's create a new drawing just to kind of illustrate my point. Okay, bottom line is this. You've probably heard the saying that to master anything, it takes about 10,000 hours. Okay, so this is just to kind of put things in perspective in a mathematical way. So when you think about that, think about what a full-time year is. So if you were to work 40 hours a week for a full year, that's about 2,000 hours. So 2,000 hours is a full-time 40-hour a week year. Okay, so essentially, if you were to work 2,000 hours a year, how many years would it take you to become a master at what you do? Okay, well, 10,000 hours divided by 2,000 hours a year, that's going to equal 5 years. Okay, the reason I'm pointing this out is because you might notice that a lot of job ads always say use that 5-year number. It's like 5 years of experience in this, 5 years of experience in that, and they just kind of arbitrarily throw that out there. Okay, this gives you a little bit more perspective on where that number is coming from. They're basically saying they would love a master of X. Generally, a master of everything doesn't necessarily exist. It's generally job ads are asking for a unicorn. Okay, so my point being is that just because an ad says 5 years or says X or what Y doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only thing they're willing to hire. Because at the end of the day, you have to hire reality. Okay, so even if you're not the unicorn that they state on their job ad, you might be the trusty steed they need. Okay, so in that case, again, point is apply. Okay, worst thing that can happen is you don't get. But again, also be fair as far as like, hey, if they're asking for the job that completely is in things that you are completely unaware of, then that's a different story. But if you're generally the stuff, you're familiar with enough of the things that are in the job ad, or the thrust of the job seems like something you feel comfortable with taking on, then apply. Okay. But again, the quality of your application matters, and there's a lot of things you can do, especially when you have, let's say, zero experience to help make your case. Okay, and that's going to be what we're going to talk about here. Okay, but now you understand like that where that 5-year number comes from, and generally my thought process on this. Okay, so this is my personal opinion that generally like your main goal when you're learning to become a developer, so when you decide, hey, you want to make this career switch, your first goal is to get to that 2,000 hour mark. Okay, so if you would think about like being like, let's see here, let me get a star, images.google.com, star icon. Okay, star, that's fine. That works for me. Okay, so the idea is imagine that like every year that you do a thing, so every 2,000 hours, you're getting a star. Of course, eventually you would want to be 5 stars. Okay, but you don't need 5 stars to start your career. Okay, your goal should be to go get that first star. Think of it as like a merit badge. Okay, you got to put so many hours into earning the badge. Okay, so you want to get this first star here. Um, Generally, if you're doing like a boot camp, that the actual sort of in-class time should equal about, let's say, 500-ish hours. Okay, so that's a quarter of the way there. Okay, so let's see here. Let's actually kind of do the math on this. Oops, wrong thing. Okay, so we want to get that 2,000 hours. Okay, so let's say minus 500 for the boot camp. Sometimes and that's just the actual in-class time. Okay, now again, for generally every 8 hours, you should be spending about of class time. You should be probably spending like 4 hours independently on your homework assignments, on practice, and stuff like that. So let's do the math on that. Okay, so generally, if you had 500 hours of coursework divided by 8 hours, okay, that's going to equal 62.5. Okay, and then that's times 4, because it's basically 4 hours for every 8 hours, so times 4. Okay, so that's another 250 hours from doing homework. Okay, what's that? Cool. So you're a good chunk of the way there. Now again, when do you start applying for jobs? It's not necessarily when you hit the 2,000, but generally it's when you hit that 2,000 hours that you're going to really start seeing the momentum in your job search, in my opinion. But really what's going to happen is that pretty much after your boot camp, there's still like where you need to start applying is where you're really going to start seeing like the difference is at that 1,000-hour mark. Okay, so there's about another 250 hours that you can try to do throughout the time you're in your boot camp. Okay, by spending more time practicing. I know when I was a boot camp student, I dropped everything. I literally dropped everything in life, my weekends, whatnot, and I would eat lunch watching like coding videos or doing coding exercises. I would always find ways to double up the time. Like if I were doing like my daily walk, I would use apps like Solo Learn or Mimeo. I think that's what it's, I remember what it's called. To do just like little coding exercises while I walk on my phone. Okay, so basically more practice. So it's another 250 hours of just kind of absorbing information, whatnot. Then you're gonna hit that 1,000-hour mark, and that's generally, my opinion, like when you're gonna really start seeing like you're gonna start feeling more comfortable with your skill set. And then you're ready to kind of start that application process. Again, it's fine to start it earlier because again, you're generally going to start it as you finish up your boot camp. Um, but keep in mind that like you want to kind of get to that 1,000-hour mark. So think of your boot camp experience as 750 hours, and you want to kind of fill in an extra 250 throughout, before, after your boot camp. Okay, and then once you hit that 1,000-hour mark, I don't know. I just feel like there's something that happens there. Like you've spent enough time with the material that you're gonna feel a lot more comfortable talking about it. Things are gonna start really kind of clicking. Um, and again, there's always more. Again, just know you're always gonna feel like there's, and as you learn more, you start realizing more of what you don't know. So for everything I learned, I realize there's 10 more things that I wasn't even aware of that I don't know. Okay, so oftentimes, the stronger that imposter syndrome gets, chances are the more further along you are because you're more aware of what you don't know, you know more of what you don't know, in the sense that like at the beginning you think, hey, it's just HTML and CSS, so I just gotta learn HTML and CSS, but I don't know this. Then you learn that and you realize there's all these like frameworks, and then you realize like other languages come into play, and then you realize other technologies come into play, and it keeps growing. Every time you take a step forward, you realize there's 10 more things built on top of the thing you just learned. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Again, so when you feel that imposter syndrome, don't let the imposter syndrome cripple you in the sense that it won't prevent you from moving forward. Instead, use your imposter syndrome to drive you forward. Meaning, when I feel that imposter syndrome, I use it. Okay, well, I guess I just need to go learn something. Okay, I know I'm never going to learn enough to fill the gap that I feel that I have, but learning something kind of or practicing something or building something usually helps again reaffirm that, hey, I do know something. And because I'm using that that feeling of imposter syndrome to drive me to do something that's going to move me forward, I continue my forward momentum. Okay, so that's just again mindset shift. So the idea of this first part of the video is just here to kind of set that mindset. Okay, so now that you kind of know you have that mindset for growth, what do I do with my time? Again, when I'm trying to fill in that 250 hours or working towards the 2,000 after I hit the 1,000-hour mark. Okay, there's a lot of good things you can do. Okay, one of my favorite things to do is head over to codewars.com and do coding exercises. Okay, generally you probably learned 2 languages in your bootcamp, maybe more, maybe less. Okay, what I generally recommend, to me, the number one skill that you out of any skill you can develop is your JavaScript skills. You can never spend too much time learning your JavaScript. So if you're still feeling shaky with your JavaScript fundamentals, because there's a lot there, a good thing to do again before, during, after your bootcamp is head over to Free Code Camp. Okay, let me just go to their main page. Let's go to where their curriculum thing is. Okay. This is a lot more than usual. Okay, whatever, just let me in. Okay, usually I can just kind of go right to it, but okay. I don't have time to read that. Okay, here we go. So what I would recommend is working through these two. Okay, it's going to be sort of at a slower pace, and it'll give you a good time to either, one, if you haven't started your bootcamp, lay some groundwork going towards your bootcamp so you get more out of it, or two, if you've already completed your bootcamp, go and repave a lot of that groundwork, because a lot of things require you to do. It's like a car. You're gonna have to clean it multiple times to really get that nice clean look. Same thing with learning anything. It's going to take several times of laying down that groundwork to truly own it. So this will be a nice systematic way to kind of review a lot of what you learned and maybe pick up on details that you may have not noticed or weren't as clear the first time around. Because it's like, doesn't matter how well presented anything is, if it's the first time you hear something, there's going to be a lot of details that are probably mentioned or presented that you're not going to pick up on because you didn't realize there were things to pick up on. It's kind of like watching the movie Shutter Island. And generally, after you've watched it a few times, each time you kind of pick up on new aspects or details in the movie that were there the first time you saw it. You just weren't looking for them. Okay, and then on subsequent listens, you'll pick up on them. So this is a good way to review. You might have access to the recordings of your classes in your bootcamp, so those are also good. And then of course, there's all the videos that I do. Okay, so you can see all my videos over here at training.AlexMercedCoder.dev. Okay, you can kind of see it here organized into different topics, making it pretty easy to find. So if you're just looking to reaffirm like your basics on Git or Visual Studio, you can go here and find the videos or blogs that I've written talking about HTML, CSS, and JS. You can kind of find what you're looking for systematically to find what you're looking for. Okay, depending on what framework you want to learn, whatnot. So there's a lot of videos here. So the point is, like, there's resources for you to learn in a systematic way. Okay, so again, but with Code Wars, going back to Code Wars, I like to do this to kind of help practice my algorithmic thinking. What a lot of people make a mistake is that they're trying to do the harder problems as soon as they can. Okay, the harder problems are good to challenge you when you already feel comfortable with the foundation. Okay, so generally what I actually still do to this day is I'll actually oftentimes spend a lot more time doing the easier problems, because what happens, you're isolating certain aspects of the language. When you do a simpler problem, you're not compounding like 10 things, you're compounding like one idea, like working with arrays or working with strings or something like that. And those simpler problems really allow you to isolate that and see what you need to do and understand certain aspects of the language much clearer. Okay, another thing I'll do is you're definitely going to want to learn, want to know JavaScript, and you'll probably learn Ruby or Python or PHP, generally as your second or third, if you learn the third language, a third language. Okay, so generally what I'll do is I will first complete the challenge in JavaScript, because JavaScript is going to be where I most naturally algorithmically think, solve the problem, and then I'll resolve the problem in those other languages. Okay, this allows me to kind of get familiar with those other languages' syntax a little bit better, but I'm not rethinking in the entire logic because I already know what the solution is. I just got to figure out, okay, the solution that I came up with in JavaScript, how would I write that in PHP? How would I write that in Ruby? How would I write that in Python? And one, that's going to give me a deeper appreciation for just context switching between the major languages, and two, helps me reaffirm what I learned and took away from that particular solution. And again, also just appreciate the nuances between the different languages, as far as like, hey, in this language, maybe this particular solution is a little bit easier because it has a built-in function or built-in tool for that, while another language doesn't. Okay, so that is a strategy I found very, very particularly helpful. So I would again do a lot of this, and again, you can then, as you get your rank up and you get your score up, this could be something you link to in your portfolio as something a potential employer may want to look at, to take a look at your Code Wars profile, to see what languages you've been training in, to see how many challenges you've done, what level of what your rank is, things like that. So Code Wars is a great place to spend your time. Okay. Cool. And let's see here. Free Code Camp News. We talked about that. Another really cool thing to be doing is checking out triplebyte.com. Okay, now triplebyte.com, what you can do is you can basically sign up here. So let me see here. I think I have done this before, but I forget if I signed in with my Google. I think so. So let's find out. Oh, no, whatever. We'll go in. Okay. No, I think it's PyEngineer login. Sign in with Google. Cool, cool. Okay, so when you log in, you can take quizzes. Okay, these are like tests on different aspects of the industry. Okay, if you score really well, it can oftentimes TripleByte will actually refer you to potential employers. Like that's kind of like their deal. They identify people who are high quality candidates and then present them. Don't necessarily take the quizzes expecting that you're gonna get like the high score if you're just right out of a boot camp, but this is a really good way to learn what questions you need to go back and do research on. So what you do is you just take one of these quizzes, and as you do the quiz, okay, if you see questions where you're like, I don't remember that terminology, I don't remember that, make a note of it, and then go back and research it after the quiz. Okay, I have found by doing a lot of these quizzes and doing research afterwards, I picked up on a lot of terminology that I otherwise probably would have never come across. Uh, but have then because I'm aware of them, become things that I do think about and have become solutions to problems down the road. Okay, so you can pick up a lot of like little sort of like nuancey techniques and things like that by using this as sort of a fine comb brush to kind of find those little morsels that you may have not have thought about. Okay, so and again, if you do really well, so like if again, and I think you can retake them after a while. You go back and you study the thing, and then you go back and do it. You can get a higher score, and then again, it'll put you in line for different jobs. Okay, so that's a really cool thing to do. Another thing you should be doing is writing blogs. Okay, and I like writing blogs here on dev.to. Okay, I like it better than Medium, mainly because one, I can write stuff in Markdown, and you should be getting used to writing things in Markdown because if you're going to be a developer, you're going to be writing documentation, and that's mostly going to be done using Markdown. Okay, so learning how to writing your blogs Markdown 1 allows me to write my blogs quicker because it's a lot quicker than using pointing and clicking to edit formatting. Even though like Medium does support Markdown to an extent, but I find the code block support just better on Dev. But also, this is again a place where a lot of developers share their blog posts. And one, you can then share your blog posts on your portfolio. Okay, that gives a good sense to your potential employer on how well you can communicate technical ideas and how you think about technical ideas by seeing what you wrote. Generally, the actual writing of it is going to help you organize your thoughts so that way when you are in an interview, you can talk about these things better because your thoughts are more organized. Okay, and it's also just a great way to learn. Like whenever I decide I want to learn X like framework, I will generally build like a sample project. And then as I build that sample project, I write a blog describing the steps that I took. So that way somebody else, one, I now have a piece of content that somebody else can enjoy. But two, it helps me sort of organize my thinking of what I'm doing. And again, additionally, you have a lot of technical companies that are constantly looking for technical content writers, and they pay pretty decent per piece. So you might get noticed if your quality of blogs is uh, awesome, and again that becomes another source of revenue. And also, if you're thinking of going down the developer advocacy path, okay, then learning how to create technical content is super important. So writing those blogs becomes a strong portfolio piece for applying for those developer advocate or developer relationship roles. Okay, and on that track, it's not just blog content, doing video content like I'm doing this video right now. Okay, again, this shows, so if you are a potential employer, you can watch any of my thousands of videos and you can see how I code, you can see how I talk about my code, how I talk about topics, how I organize my thoughts, how I express myself, what my personality is like, all from watching videos without ever having to have met me for an interview. And you're seeing me at my most confident because this is not necessarily like an interview where you might be a little bit nervous because the stakes are higher than you just recording a video and you're just speaking freely. So this gives a way for people to kind of see you at your most calm, at your most natural. Because again, the stakes of me talking to a webcam are none. Okay, so I can just be myself and put my best foot forward. Okay, so you get a good vibe of who I am by watching this. So that is put out video content. But was what I'm saying. So there's videos, there's blogs, And another really cool thing you can do is you can start podcasts. Okay, I love starting podcasts. And really, the barrier to entry to starting a podcast is zero. Okay, you have probably the easiest thing you can do is sign up for Anchor.fm. It's free. Okay, and you can start as many podcasts as you want. You have to create a different account for each one, but you can then just upload episodes, and it'll automatically distribute it to Spotify and its own directory without you having to do anything. So your podcast will be on Spotify. It generally will give you a guide on how to add it to everywhere else, which isn't that hard, especially adding it to places like iTunes and Google Play and directories like that. It's not hard, but it becomes a way to another way to build your brand. Okay, so generally my recommendation is either if you're again graduating from a boot camp, work with a few of your fellow students, some of your colleagues to create a joint podcast and take turns, putting out content. So that way you're not worried about having to come up with an episode every week. So basically if you and three others each come up with one episode per month, you now have a podcast that has content every week. Okay? And bottom line, what does that content, because it's generally audio. It could be a couple different things you could do in use this as a venue to explain concepts. Okay, if anyone's listened to my podcast, that's what I mainly do. I explain concepts because in my videos I can actually show how I code things, but then in my audio and my podcast, like the Web Dev 101 podcast. So again, if you haven't subscribed to my podcast, you should. So let's show you those podcasts. Spotify.com. Okay, so again, go subscribe to my podcast. I'll just search my name. Okay, podcasts and shows. Okay, there's Web Dev 101. Okay, that's where I explain like web development topics. Probably one of my more popular podcasts. Okay, there's Web and Data. This is a new one where I am doing interviews with people in the web and data space, and that's another way you can use your podcast. So you can do a audio like this where I explain concepts, right? And basically that's useful for people who want to understand those concepts. But again, it's something that I can share in my portfolio, and people can see how well I explain these things to get a better understanding of what I understand and how I understand it. Okay. Then in web and data, I interview people. Okay, so this is more me interviewing people that I want to interview. But if you are a recent bootcamp grad, you can use this as a way to get to network with people that you'd want to know as far as your job search. So if there's a company you're interested in working at, um, and you'd want to get to know their product manager or know one of their developers and build that connection, what you can do is you can say, hey, I would like to interview you for my podcast. I'm really interested in your company. Would you be interested in just doing an interview on my podcast about your job and about what you do? Okay, this gives you a reason to have that conversation and build that connection. They're going to be happy because it gives them an opportunity to establish their brand through your podcast. You're establishing your brand through your podcast. Um, and now you've built this connection that can then be more leverageable later on because you've already built rapport instead of just a cold reach out saying, hey, I'm interested in working with you, what can I do? Which, a lot of developers get a lot of messages like that. So getting an invite and providing value to them by helping them broadcast themselves gives you sort of another nice entry point. And again, if you do it as a group, again, 4 people each do an episode a week, generating that content is very manageable. Like have a nice steady flow to grow that podcast. And again, a podcast could eventually also become a source of revenue if it becomes popular enough and you monetize it. So theoretically, creating the content is a revenue path in itself because you can make money doing the YouTube videos, you can make money doing the blogs, you can make money doing podcasting. But at the end of the day, more importantly, is they give you a way to establish your brand and establish your authenticity as a developer. Okay, one allows you, the more you communicate. So again, me recording podcasts, videos, blogs has made me a very efficient communicator when it comes to technical matters or anything complicated, because I spend literally all my time thinking about how to simplify things. So this is a good way to, one, again, broadcast who you are, make yourself stand out from the sea of people who've learned the skill but don't promote themselves at all. Okay, so no one knows who they are. And again, if people don't know who you are, they're not going to necessarily hire you because they don't know you exist. So the idea is you got to broadcast your existence and broadcast what's awesome about you. And the only way to, people don't know what's in your head, they just know what you display. So how you communicate is going to be a big factor in how you are able to broadcast your ability. And again, videos also help because people can actually see you doing the thing. Okay, so I'm big advocate on using content as a way to boost your reach. Okay, So that's a couple of things you can do. Again, in your portfolio, there's a couple things you can do to kind of beef up your portfolio, your actual resume. So oftentimes you might include additional documents beyond the resume, like a cover letter and a resume. Okay, generally I will defer to the best practices you'll learn from any like a job coach you'll have during your cohort, whatnot. Not, I wouldn't say I'm the expert on best practices regarding how to structure your resume or how to write a cover letter, but sometimes you'll have the opportunity to include additional documents, which sometimes those can help you stand out. And ones that have helped me stand out is one having like like a one sheet portfolio document. So instead of just saying, hey, here's my portfolio website, Jenny will have a separate one pager that basically has like a paragraph and a link to the projects that I would like to highlight, because the idea is you want to curate their experience, the experience of the hiring manager. The idea is you don't want them to kind of hope, you don't want to hope they get to yes, you want to guide them to yes. Because again, you finding a job is a sales process. You are selling yourself. So just like any product, we can't assume that our target market just understands the value of the product and gets it. You need to kind of guide them there. So you can use something like a portfolio one sheet not only to cast their attention to the projects you want them to look at specifically, but as to what they should be getting out of it. So I'll be like, okay, in this project, this highlights my ability to work with X language. I had to kind of overcome X challenge in building this, and I put that in the letter. So that way, again, they don't have to learn that stuff when they interview me. They can know that stuff up front. They can see the project, they can see the code, and they know what to focus in on because I've already told them what to focus in on. So they're naturally going to gravitate towards those things instead of me just saying, here's the project, and then I hope they notice the things I want to notice and don't notice the things I don't want them to notice. Okay, again, curate the experience. Okay, if you do a referral, okay, provide referrals as a letter, not just as a bunch of names and numbers. Add a paragraph as to why that person is important. Okay, how do they know you? Okay, so like, I worked with Bob at X role. Okay, we were co-instructors. Okay, we created course material together. Things like that, so that way they can understand sort of the context of the relationship and kind of already kind of going into it knowing what they're going to get out of it. Okay, that the idea is you kind of want them to kind of already know everything they need to know, basically just from reading your application, ideally. Okay, they may not read all of it. Okay, probably most of the time they won't, but the idea is that those who will seriously consider you probably will. Okay, and they may notice that's like a little bit different. I was like, oh, a portfolio letter, a reference letter. Okay, this is interesting. They may not look at it, but if they do, they're gonna have a more curated experience and an easier path to yes. And that's always a goal. How can I make the path to yes easier? So one of it is making it easy for them to get to know you. Don't make them wait till the interview. So again, how do you do that? Through these extra documents and through content, blogs, podcasts, videos, things that they can experience ahead of time and get to know you beforehand. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of applicants, especially at the entry level, okay? And you need to stand out, okay? Even before you get into the interview. And two, what was I gonna go? You have to kind of think about it from their point of view. Okay, it's not like they have. It's their goal isn't to sit there and be like, oh, out of the kindness of my heart, I'm gonna give people a chance. They are hiring for a role that they need to get things they need done. Okay, so they're looking for value back. Okay, but there's inherently a risk because in technical jobs, especially developer jobs, chances are if you're the wrong choice, if you're not a right fit for this job, they won't know for about 90 days. Because no matter how well you know code, it's going to take about 30 to 90 days for you to get familiar with the code base that you're going to be working with. Doesn't matter how well you know JavaScript and TypeScript and all these other things, you still got to understand, hey, what are the functions they wrote as part of their particular project? How did they structure their files? How do these files connect to each other? And that takes time. Okay, so again, it won't be around till the 90-day mark that they really know, oh, okay, this was a bad fit. And at that point, they've already lost 90 days. They've lost the money they've paid you already. They've lost 90 days that they could have spent hiring someone else and training someone else, and now they're going through this whole process again. Okay, so there's a huge cost to making the wrong choice. Okay, and if you understand that, then you understand the challenge of the person making the hiring decision, and you can figure out how to communicate that you don't carry that you present safety. The idea is again, you're guiding them to yes. So you got to paint that picture of like, okay, why you're not as risky as you may look like on paper. Because again, there is, when you're hiring someone with, let's say, no experience, there is a risk to that. So you can take all the contextual stuff that I talked about, again, the content, adding the extra documents, and provide as much content as possible, so that way they can feel as confident as possible about you going into it, because they feel like they already know you, okay, because you've curated that getting to know you process, okay. And of course you got to have the skills to back it up, which is why you got to, practice on code wars, build projects. Again, I like doing the same thing multiple times in multiple languages. So like I'll build a backend API in, let's say, JavaScript, then I'll do it again in Python, and then do it again in Ruby, then do it again in PHP, okay. And then I'll build a front end for that API, and I'll do it in React, then do it in Vue, then do it in Svelte, then do it in Solid.js. Again, it makes the differences between them really clear, and makes the fundamental ideas much clearer, because you're starting to see the commonalities between frameworks and languages, which means the actual abstract ideas are much clearer relative to the actual implementation of those ideas. So that's my personal sort of like what works for me. Um, cool. But there is one more piece of advice I'm going to give you on how to get experience. Another way you think you can do with a group of your fellow colleagues in your cohort is, um, you can get band together. So again, 4 or 5 people, um, and create a brand name. So we'll say, Cantaloupe Designs, or no, Cantaloupe Digital, we'll say. Okay, just to make it up a name, doesn't matter. Okay, and then basically first create a website, you know, as basically assume that you guys are now a development agency looking for a client. So create a website that talks about the services you provide. We provide, uh, development services. We will help you, build and deploy backends, build and deploy front ends, style your website, yada yada yada. Build a website for that. So that's your first project. So you work as a team, so you learn through that process of doing pull requests and merge requests. So you have that experience to point to for additional sort of, hey, like this, I have some real world working in a team experience. But then what you do is look for like the local restaurant, like look for the local pizza place that has like a website that they built in like in the 90s in pure HTML that really could use an update. Help them build something they can manage on their own. I would highly recommend using something like a Jamstack type approach. So usually this could be using like something like builder.io or Contentful to host the data, because that's going to be something easy for that business owner to log into, edit the data. But then you can pull that data via an API into a static site generator like Gatsby or Next.js. And basically, once you've built the site, all they have to do is they can go manage like the contents of their menu on Contentful or Builder.io, and you now hand them a much nicer website that they can manage on their own. You do it for free, okay? Because again, you can deploy all those things for free, get them started. There's a free tier on Contentful and Builder.io. You can deploy a Gatsby project or a Next.js project to Vercel or Netlify for free. Technically the usage of your typical local pizza place is probably going to be within their free tiers. But you build this for them. You now have a real life production project you can point to. You've now built a team, and you've built a brand, okay, that you could leverage into an actual business if you want. Okay, if you suddenly now get referrals to other clients, but now you have experience that you can put on your resume. You can say, developer at Cantaloupe Digital, and then say, hey, responsible for building projects. Here's an example of a project we built. Okay, you don't have to wait for permission to get experience. Okay, there's plenty of people who need web developers and can't afford web developers, and they're perfect use cases for low cost, low risk use cases for you to develop the experience you need to strengthen your application. So if you take everything I've talked about in this video and apply it, and think about how every day I can move the needle forward on one of these things, where I'm spending some more time on Code Wars today, or I'm creating some content and then putting links to that content in my applications, okay, or working with some friends to do some freelance work, some pro bono freelance work to build up our experience and to build up our portfolios. You keep taking these steps, you'll find that lots of opportunities will pop up. Okay, and I can tell you from experience, from someone who's done freelance work, who's worked at an agency, who's worked at a startup, who's trained people at bootcamps, who's been a student at bootcamp, and a prolific content creator in audio, video, and blogs. I can tell you from doing all those things that they're worthwhile doing. It's very manageable if you think about ways you can double them up. So again, like when I'm doing practice stuff, I'll turn them into blogs. Okay, when I do coding challenges, I also have a repo where I'll commit my solutions so that way I can make sure that my GitHub heat map stays nice and green. Okay, I write my blog. So for example, if you go to you go to one of my blogs like rockoverflow.com, this is a Next.js static website. Okay, and these blog posts are just markdowns that get turned into HTML CSS. So every time I add a blog post, that's a git commit. Okay, so I'm getting if I don't feel like coding a whole application today and I just would like to write a blog post, I can just write a blog post and there's my git commit. Okay, and if I don't feel like writing a blog post, I can go do a coding challenge, and then if I go to github.com/AlexMercedCoder, I have a repo here where I have my daily code practice. Okay, and then every time I do like a coding challenge, and see, like I have a folder for like each language that I'll do practice in. You don't necessarily do practice in so many languages. I just do a lot of educational content. But let's say I'm talking about like JavaScript. I can go to JavaScript and see there's like a folder for code challenges, and then every time I do a code challenge, I'll put the solution here in a folder, and that becomes a git commit. Okay, so and then I can link to this in my resume, in my cover letter, and say, hey, I do regular coding challenges, which can be seen here. Okay, I've written, and again, not everything has to be an application. For example, I write a lot of libraries. So you go to my portfolio website, AlexMercedCoder.dev. Okay, if you go to libraries here, more of my portfolio is probably more the libraries that I've contributed to NPM than actual applications. Okay, and you can see like frameworks that I've built. Did I add my newest thing? Did I add SenseODB? I don't think I did yet. But yeah, I've added a lot of libraries. Yeah, okay, I did add it. Cool. So I actually even created a whole database. Okay. Um, but people can go in there and they can click and read my code and so forth. Okay. So, yeah, that's, I think, all my wisdom that I have to share. It's not everything that you can and should do. Of course, you should always be networking and reaching out to people. I'm regularly adding people on LinkedIn and making sure that I'm posting relevant content on LinkedIn for my audience. Same thing on Twitter. Okay, go be part of Twitter conversations with other developers. Go check stuff that's around posts that relate to hashtags around things you're interested in, and interact with them in organic ways to build other connections. And again, create content. Create content is another great way to just kind of get yourself out there. So hopefully you find this helpful. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Again, make sure to check out training.AlexMercedCoder.dev. Make sure to join the Slack and Discord communities over there at devnursery.com. And otherwise, have a great day. And hopefully if you guys enjoyed this, leave a comment saying that you appreciate it, and give this video a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much.